Hello and welcome to another WeAreDevelopers Live. I'm Chris Heilmann. I'm the VP of Developer Relations of WeAreDevelopers. And with me is the guy with the guitars in the background.
Hello, I'm Dan. I'm a developer advocate here, also at WeAreDevelopers, and we've got another guest with us today, Chris. So back to you.
We do, but first of all, I'm gonna introduce something else because we have a special show today. Everybody says that every single show is special, isn't it? And none of them are then. So today we have this show, like always, like every Wednesday, but also in the afternoon today we have a live talk. So we have a talk by somebody from NVIDIA. And this is the person. I'm going to scroll on the other computer. You can see it. So Andy Terrell is going to come up later on in this afternoon, 4 o'clock. You can sign in again. You can use this QR code or go to the website that is actually the live website to get a ticket to see that, because we wanted to track who's coming. And to tell you more about this, I'm hand over to myself from yesterday to show you what Andy is going to talk about. Hello and welcome to another WeAreDevelopers Live. We're not live yet, but we're recording for tomorrow, because you will have seen me live a second ago. So this is not me, this is me from yesterday. And I'm here from Andy from tomorrow or this afternoon. So this afternoon at 4 o'clock, we have a special guest here, and that's Andy Terrell. Andy, who are you and what do you do?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'm Andy. I work on the Cuda Python product here at NVIDIA. I've been a Python person for 20 plus years, and what I was brought in to do is help bring Python to be a first-class language in the Cuda ecosystem. So we're trying to bring the Cuda speed to the Python ecosystem, and I'll be demoing a lot of the libraries and all of the gaps that we're filling in order to get top performance in Python with Cuda. And so, yeah, look forward to showing everyone what we got.
Excellent. So you don't have to resort to C++ or other languages that have the hardware acceleration coming, but Python goes into that. Can you do that for JavaScript next as well? Because I want to do some multi-threading and lots of GPUs, or is that not on your doc so far?
It's one on the list. I got a list of 100 different languages people want, and Python with its ties to machine learning and generative AI, which is so hot, kind of became the first one that we're looking at, but can't make any promises, but I've heard it before.
Excellent. It's interesting to see when you ask people which is older, Python or Java, they will always say the wrong answer, right?
Yeah. Most people don't know how old Python really is, but you know, it's one of those languages that kind of grew up in Europe and on the internet and really kind of took off more and more, gaining steam. It's known for being slow, but at the same time being very productive. So I think it's kind of one of those things where a lot of people are starting to see like, oh yeah, the productivity matters a whole lot more sometimes than the speed. So, but Cuda together with Python is best of both worlds.
It is fun. We did how the use case becomes makes the thing fashionable again. Like Python fell out of, like when Ruby came around, it was much easier for people, and then like PHP, Rust, all the things that people are playing with right now. And then out of a sudden, like AI came, and then everything. Python became a big thing. Now it's actually supported in Excel. I saw as well, so that's really odd. And like it's great to see that. I had the same with SVG. SVG was just not understandable for people. And I worked on Firefox back then, and we were the first browser to actually allow you to use SVG inside an HTML document. And out of a sudden, and with mobile being a need that you can scale things without losing quality, out of a sudden, everybody used it again. So that's great.
You better look out. You better look out, because your beloved JavaScript's moving over for PyScript. So it's coming to the browser too. So Python is pretty much everywhere.
Well, that was me from yesterday. I was so young, wasn't I? It's amazing. And Andy is going to be here this afternoon and talk about how to get actually Python faster and get access to all the hardware that you have using the Cuda framework. Looking forward to that one, and hopefully it's going to be as insightful as I think it would be. He's got lots of slides, so be prepared for that one. Yeah, I liked it, and he said, like, I'm a Python person. That sounds like a lizard people or something, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, I don't know if I prefer that or Pythonista, because I think Pythonista sounds cool but slightly cheesy. So Python person sounds quite sweet, I thought.
Yeah, Pythonista is like, I don't know, it's like it has these like communist undertones kind of thing, like,
Yeah,
you know, it's really weird.
Comunista, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, last week I said some things about a certain government, so we couldn't actually promote this show on YouTube. So I'm not going to do anything like this week. I wanted to make some jokes about Germany, but people told me not to, so I'm just following orders.
No comment.
So what we have again is a guest, and I'm very excited to have our guest here. So Nicole Jeschko is a person from the Austrian borders of Germany, and she is actually one of our CODE100 challengers. So Nikki, how are you doing?
Hi, thanks. I'm fine. I'm really great. I'm really love to be here and to be your guest today. Thanks for the invitation.
You say that now. They all say that at the beginning, and then they're like, oh, you made me look at all these things, and I don't know what's going on. So let's dive into the resources that we have for this week. Last week, we actually, Werner, your husband, just actually said hello in the chat. So he was supposed to be today here, because that's the cool thing. We have 2 challengers in CODE100 that are married. Well, they're still married. I don't know if they will be after the competition at the World Congress. But we will see what's happening there. So
I'm pretty sure we work together a lot of times, and so we will check that.
So the first thing that I put up, and it's just basically with a lot of like links that all point to the same thing, is attribute in CSS is getting new functionality. And last week's guest was super excited about that. Dan, what do you think of that? Have you been using that before, or is it something that you look forward to as well?
Yeah, I think I look forward to it because I might use it more. Sorry, Nick, I didn't mean to jump in ahead then. I think I might use it more with some of these updates because I don't use it a great deal, if I'm honest. I think it's one of those things that's actually older than it feels. It still feels like a very new feature, but it's not. I think it's been around actually quite a few years. I would just say that it's something I don't naturally reach for. So hopefully, these developments would mean that I would reach for it more. How about you, Nikki? Do you use it often, or is it something you forget about entirely, or what's your thoughts?
I haven't forget it entirely, but I'm not using it often, and I don't see it often in my projects now. So maybe I'm putting in it in the future with the new features. I think so. I will try to use it.
You're a front-end developer by trade, right?
I'm a full stack developer with C# in the backend and JavaScript and HTML and CSS in the front end, and a TSQL database in the database. So I'm making everything, but we're a small team, so if you're a small team, you need to take hands on every part that's broken.
Mm-hmm. So you're not wearing glasses because you're a C# developer, right? No, okay.
You're on fire today, Chris.
Yeah, well, I try my best. The great thing about that one is that the attributes has been there for a while, and it was mostly for generated content. But now you can actually use it in all the different selectors, and that's the interesting thing about it. So you have an even more close connection between HTML and CSS. And if you use it as a data attribute, I find that really interesting. I've done a video, I think like 2012, 2010. Like of data attributes, and actually how you can access them in CSS, in HTML, and in JavaScript, and how you can actually make them work with each other and do comparisons in selectors. And now we have full control over that. So David, who just joined the chat as well, and he was our guest last time, basically pointed out that this is kind of like what other libraries like Tailwind and others give you, and that's going to be now in basic CSS, basically in the standard in there. So it's not available in general public yet. You talked about that, Dan. So how can I use this right now already?
Yeah, so I think I haven't looked in exactly to what it's sort of behind and where it's available. I know it's very, very limited availability at the moment. Some of the CodePens even sort of say on there the browser you're using, and I think the browser I was using, which was Arc, no surprises, didn't sort of work for any of them. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that it always felt quite hacky to me. I don't know why. Every time I would use it, it felt very hacky, and I think that sort of says something about kind of the place that it's at, where it's available. We know it's an option, but it's not something you reach for. It feels like you reach for it when you need it in a specific instance, rather than I'm going to use this as part of my sort of everyday, the way I approach things. So I just don't really know what it means, because again, I use Tailwind quite a lot. And I know that Tailwind has just released a new version where they've changed how they approach things like arbitrary values. So that could include this, but I think it's all very up in the air. Our episode last week with Dave talked a lot about this, that there's this sort of pulling in two different directions from the web and then things like Tailwind. So I think I need a bit of time to see how this all settles down and if this actually becomes a feature we all use more regularly or not.
Interesting to see, but it's yeah, there's lots of resources on it, so I think it's a pretty fascinating idea. Generated content felt always a weird thing in CSS because you're worried about the accessibility of it. Will it be available for a screen if it's not part of the markup? Will it? How can I control it if it's not generated? It feels like I'm maintaining something at a different part. I should maintain it in the HTML. I maintain it in the CSS with like generated content. And that felt always like a bit of a weird thing. But you could do great stuff with it. You could, for example, read out the href attribute and see if it ends in a PDF and then show a PDF icon next to it with generated content, for example. That shouldn't be in the HTML because I don't want to hear PDF icon, PDF icon, PDF icon. I can already hear that from the link. So there's a lot of redundancy that this can actually make go away. Now, an interesting thing with this one is that the create React component, React application, that first script to actually run, to actually build an app, has become kind of an anti-pattern because it's been deprecated. So if you look at this one, it actually says in the React ecosystem that they now are looking at this again and actually fixing it. So they're making sure that it's not becoming deprecated anymore, because there's tons and tons of tutorials out there that have like outdated material, and they say like first thing, build this create React application. So as a maintainer of an open source project, it's horrible because it came out of sync. It should go back to the resource all the time. So it feels like, where do we find our information? How about you, Nicole? If you look up something new, where do you go? Where's your resource to find things?
Yeah, actually you sometimes. In a few cases, in your dev digests, I'm getting every week, I think. Month, don't know. And actually, I'm Googling it now. And sometimes, if it's not really new, but I only want to have some topics about this, I'm using ChatGPT, for example, to get some new information I don't know, but not so new that they're not in the LLM. So mostly I'm Googling or taking KI, also AI.
That's interesting because Google in America now gives you like AI texts as well, rather than the links already. So you need to do some jailbreaking hacks to actually go back to the old interface. And it feels like we're in this world, so it's going to be tricky to actually find out. In general, the learnings of that one is if you take a tutorial, if you take a look at the course, look at the date, because you might get actually really outdated information and actually anti-patterns or like really bad ideas of things. I don't know how fast the C# market is moving. Like I'm not at all in that. Is there any cool blogs or resources that you take a look at and you follow?
The new things in C#, I have a colleague that is implementing it, and I'm only supporting him now. But I think he is getting his information, for example, from conferences or also from newsletters, for specific newsletters.
Okay. Yeah, I mean I think that's where we're going, because I feel like going to like feeds in X or in other platforms, it's just full of like AI generated nonsense by now, or people trying to profile themselves rather than the real resources that you want. So Dan, what do you do? Do you have an RSS reader? Do you go with that, or do you also do your newsletter and filtering thing?
Yeah, I find it difficult because there's so much noise, if I'm honest. I think, I never really got into RSS. I always sort of would try and set one up and think, yeah, I'm really going to refine it. It'd be like a weekend task, and I would just lose interest and then go back to kind of, just kind of swimming in the noise, really. But I do think that there is a need for that, in terms of actually getting content from human beings, because this is a really great example of it. React 19, so millions and millions of projects running on it, and there's a major issue that would stop anybody actually installing it. And if you went to the LLM, it wouldn't know anything about it. It's too recent. It would say everything's fine, you're doing the right thing, and it would just tell you, you shouldn't have any problems, but you do. So what do? You could find that post on GitHub. I think it was Mark Erickson, actually. He's a big-time maintainer for Redux. That's why I see him quite a lot. So, there's people out there doing these amazing write-ups of the problem and the solution that's in the works, but you'd have to find it on a thread on GitHub. If you didn't speak to a human being, you'd probably never find it, or wouldn't find it very easily. So I don't know. I don't think there's really like a way that we fix it. It's just a combination of things from newsletters, from your tried and tested places that you go each day to get your articles. And, I think I only really use AI as an addition to that, trying to find more information rather than using it as the sort of source of truth, because it's usually wrong, as we'll see later on.
So that brings you to an interesting point. Like if you use a cursor or some other editors that actually generate the code for you, they would have that outdated information in them and generate outdated code, right?
Yeah, and they do quite a lot. I've actually spent the last 2 weeks I think I'm going to turn this into a blog post and try and sort of document it, because I built something fairly quickly using Cursor, and at the time, it seemed like the approach it was taking was pretty sound, and it was only over time that I really saw the downside to when it doesn't know the context of your project, because there were just simple API calls that it could have said, yep, this is a shared call, we can make this one, and instead it would put an individual call into each file, and they would all be slightly different, so then it doesn't get cached and it gets run each time, and it becomes a huge problem. And AI would never know that it was causing that problem. It would never really know that was a problem, and it doesn't have the big picture of the project or the good practices to even know it's doing anything wrong. So there's no way you can rely on it. I'd love to say you can, but you can't.
So we should call it cursing, not cursor, or like. I hate when they give things generic names like that, because it's really hard to find them. Like, you call something cursor, you might as well call it table or like shoe. Yeah. And like, and then people are like, why is it not available? I found this one interesting, a WebAssembly compiler that fits in a tweet, and I should click on it on the machine that I have opened rather than trying on the screen where it's shown. So here's somebody that actually wrote a WebAssembly compiler that is actually this long and completely unreadable. And it's pretty nuts what you can do, and I have no idea what's going on there. Can you talk us through that, Dan?
No is the answer to that one. Yeah, taking a quick look. It's again, I always think that I love the fact that there are programmers out there that are doing these kinds of things, and I think if somebody's getting excited about it, it must be really interesting. I look at it and it's above my level. I think I don't really know what's going on there. Is that code supposed to be readable? I assume it isn't, but yeah, I'm sure it's impressive. If you tell me it is, Chris.
It is impressive because it actually does the instantiation and everything with it. But the thing is, if I find that in my code base, I think I've been hacked and somebody's trying to inject some things. Like when you have a WordPress instance like I have, and you have like people just trying to get like a payload in there as a base64 encoded PHP. So they actually write PHP, malicious PHP, base64 encoded as a string, and then write a PHP function around it that actually unpacks it and executes it. So it doesn't look like malicious PHP, but it just looks like a random string. And this just like, yeah. I mean, we can do a session with a few friends of mine that do this minimalist JavaScript stuff. Like there's this one guy who did like the favicon Defender, which was a game of Defender that was running in the favicon of the tool of the browser. So, and that's basically the whole thing is code like that actually generates itself, and it's an interesting, clever trick. But I think it's just also good because it brings you to that WebAssembly from the ground up page and gets more people into the WebAssembly thing. Now, Nikki, you work with C#. Do you also use Blazor? And that basically is WebAssembly for C#, isn't it?
Would be nice if we would work with that, but we have taken the project a month ago now completely to our workspace, and now we're dating it up. We are so outdated and deprecated in every part of the software. So now the big part is to taking that to a new level, to update everything. And I might think that we are using some kind of that also in the project, in the new one, in the refactored one. But that will be a lot of work. So let's see. It's not my decision.
I remember when I worked at Microsoft and the inventor of C# came up to me and talked about Blazor, and I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna use C# inside the browser by running it as a binary and then using WebAssembly to compile it back to JavaScript in the browser." And I'm like, "Why are you doing this?" But turns out there's a lot of like legacy products that actually only will work that way. It feels like Java applets again to a degree, that basically you put native code inside the browser. But I think it's also as developers who are not working on day-to-day things, we always think it's like, well, just rewrite it from scratch, use that new framework and do something with it. So the code base that you're working with, like how huge is that and how hard to maintain is that?
Too hard. That's why I'm trying to say, my team lead, please throw it away and we will make it new, a new project. But he's not my opinion. And so we have to deal with this old legacy code, and let's see what we can make it out of it.
Okay. So what's the market that you're working in? Like what kind of
it's an internal project, and a really cool intern project with every part of the company is in that software and can work with it, and it touches every part of the whole company. And I'm working on ETC training center. That's the biggest training center for IT courses in Austria, in Switzerland, and in Germany, I think. I don't know exactly. And we do not have so much users to come to manage, but we have a lot of data, and so that the database is our heart. And the original author of the whole project is also mainly a database developer, and so he put all the business logic in the database, and now we're trying to get that out of the database and put it in C#. But we can't do that now because the project isn't so well maintained now, but we're working on it.
Interesting. That's the kind of stuff where you wonder if an AI agent could help, like to just analyze the patterns and find like false positive, find duplicates, these kind of things. But yeah, we don't talk that much about it.
I've tried with Cursor sometimes, and I think it's too complex. The whole process is too complex for that, because the database is really huge with so much data in it, and not so well maintained also, like the backend is. And so the AI has it really hard to find out where the references and how to get there and there. And AI is sometimes helpful, but not so often.
I think my favorite when I worked in C# or was forced to work in C#, I guess the real name is, you get these Northwind databases and like the Contoso demos, like of when you learn the C#, and it's like the most organized, clean database you ever seen in your life. It's also the last clean database you see in your life, because the real things that come from customers are a different story altogether.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I once had one that was basically a text database that was bitmap files with text in them stored in the database instead of the text, and I still don't know what happened there.
Yeah, we have JavaScript code in our database, and we have HTML files in our database. So
that's how you inject code. That's how malware happens. That's really a good idea.
doesn't matter, because it's only you can only get to this project in our system, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, So you would leak the data inside their own system. So that makes no sense then, yeah. I like visualizations, and Dan, you're like the person with like more style than me. I actually love that one. That there's new set methods in JavaScript coming, or they are in JavaScript now. And Wes Bos, who's an incredible person, like he's one of the best presenters and trainers that I know. He's been super helpful with a lot of the stuff in there. And he did this like showing the different set methods as Venn diagrams. And I found that really clever to actually give people an idea what that is about. So what's your take on that?
I love it personally. I think what jumped out at me actually was I sort of come from a graphics background originally, so all this terminology and the visualizations is seen in there as well. If you were to open something like Figma or Illustrator, select two different objects, then you'll see these. I think they call it the Pathfinder in Illustrator. So it's how you kind of combine different shapes to make new ones. So that just instantly meant that I almost didn't need to read the code. You could see what it does visually. Yeah, big fan of visualizations. I think it helps you learn in a variety of ways. You might be somebody that just reads the text. You might be somebody who just looks at the images. And that actually gets me excited about it more than someone going, yeah, here's loads of new set methods, go and use them. Here's a list, bullet points. Visualization, actually, I could grab that right now, start using it, and it gets me excited about it. So yeah, I love it.
So this is old hat in C#, right? You had all these methods for sets already.
Yeah, but I think I'm remembering on this picture more on a database. On the first day on the database, you're learning exactly that. It reminds me so much.
Well, that's why web developers only eat on their own, because they don't like to join tables.
Need to remember that.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And then we have some interesting articles on like discovery coding, and that had me in hysterics. Because to a degree, I don't know, I guess you looked at it as well, Dan. It basically says like discovery coding is a practice of understanding a problem by writing code first rather than attempting to do some design or thinking beforehand. This just sounds to me like an explanation of cowboy coding, doesn't it? Like.
Yeah, it kind of describes how I write code anyway, I think. No, it doesn't, but I can't see how that would. I mean, I try and map these things into other domains. Like I think, okay, I've got instruments behind me. Sometimes you pick up an instrument and you don't think about what you're trying to write. You just play the instrument and you come up with something. So I can understand that, but surely you only need to do discovery coding in like very specific instances rather than just every day rocking up and saying, I'm not even going to look at my tickets. I'm just going to start writing code. Maybe I'm just looking into it too much.
Yeah, I mean, he has explanations there, what the tension is with other developers and stuff, and what the benefits are. So it actually, I mean, it was glib of me to basically say that there are some points to it. But I found like the more I progressed in my career as a developer, the more I actually realized how much time you waste writing code that you shouldn't have done if you had thought about it beforehand. It's very exciting to just start hacking away and doing things, but then you actually, if you think about the problem that you need to solve first and actually start documenting that and then writing the code to solve it, or write the unit tests first and then actually write the code accordingly, you realize you write a lot less code. But I think maybe these days where 90% of our code is auto-generated with a tab rather than just writing the code, it's not that important anymore. So, Nikki, what's your approach? Do you like coding first, or do you like thinking about the code first, or is it something that it's 50-50?
Depends on the problem. If it's really, really big, I'm thinking first and visualize my problem and see how I can get to the solution. But if it's a small thing, I'm coding first.
Yeah.
I think the visualization is a really big thing in programming if you're making some bigger things.
I guess also the repetition thing is another problem. If everybody codes like that in a team, then you will have the same solutions that everybody came up with. I found that like instead of using a reusable component that I already had, I start when I just go for it. I just write the same things over and over again.
I wonder though, Chris, on that, just to jump in, if sometimes even though we think we might be thinking through the problem and then how to solve it. I wrote an article yesterday about how this kind of over-engineering happens, and that, you know, it can be that you actually are going for your chosen language, and that's not always actually the most efficient approach. You're picking a language that you go, yeah, I can do this really quickly, but you might not have even needed the language at all. We use the example of, you know, you want to convert a string to just turn the first letter to be uppercase. So we started with this like quite verbose, very old school way of doing it, through to a one-liner, but then that's not, you know, scalable. You couldn't repeat it through your code, so you turn it into a function, and then you realize I can do the whole thing with CSS with the first letter, you know, pseudo element. And so we've gone right, okay, JavaScript first, before we said, do we need that at all? So I don't know if even with discovery coding, we would have still probably ignored CSS, thinking it's not a real programming language, etc. We'll leave that debate for another day. But you see what I'm saying? That we probably don't really think the problem through in the best way, whereas still quite tunnel vision, I think.
So what is your, I mean, Nicole, you plowed through the CODE100 challenges when we gave them to you. Like there was a really, really fast solution, and it was really interesting to see. What is your like day-to-day thing? Do you do code most for work, or do you also do things, side projects on your own? Do you do discovery for yourself? And what is more fun?
I love working in my company because it's every day there's a stunning problem I can solve. I love problem solving, but I'm also having some of my private program projects I'm working on, but they're not going so well because of time. I have 2 children and a husband. They need sometimes my time. Yeah, so yeah, I love problem solving, and if I get a problem, I can't take it off before I have solved them, and so I got also to the CODE100. It's like I'm biting in it, and I can't take it off till I'm through.
That's a tricky one, isn't it? Like the amount of times when you actually build something, and the more we have these tools that we have these days, you think you can build everything within a day. Like,
Yeah,
but challenging yourself to take something and at the end of the day not finish it and go back next morning to do it, and you're out of the zone. You have to get back into it. So it feels like oftentimes I build a lot of small things rather than thinking about one big one. Now, Dan, you're doing side projects because your boss is allowing you to do that, strangely enough. And how do you? I see on X and other places where you basically say, like, I would have released it this afternoon, but I'm still thinking about some things. That tension of like finishing it and releasing the next iteration, how do you deal with that?
Difficulty, I think. It's Nikki, when you were saying, you know, I have kids and I've only got one child, but the same thing. It's in a lot of time gets taken up by her, and I think that actually that tension is sometimes you have to zoom out of programming entirely. Because the other day I got a little bit frustrated. You know, I write code between about 8 o'clock and 11 p.m. and then I get the weekend. You know, so the energy is not exactly at an all-time high at that point. But I was working something over the weekend, didn't have a lot of time. Life just gets in the way. I was slightly frustrated on Sunday, and then I had to kind of have a word with myself in going, I enjoy my job. I've got a good family. I'm working on a project I like. Nobody cares if it gets finished today or tomorrow. And yeah, I'm about 3 weeks behind where I wanted to be. I actually went to launch this project, did a quick test at like a very small scale and broke it immediately. So I then found out I had some major problems. I just think actually, if I put all that pressure on myself, for what? For what? You know, I think your day job has to come first, right? It's paying the bills. So the other stuff is just nice if you get it done. I'm not going to stress myself out. I've got enough going on in my life. But do you feel the same, Nikki? I saw you nodding, but I wonder if there's some things you don't agree with or do, or how do you feel?
I'm in the good position that I love my job and I love my company that I'm working with, and I love the people around me. So it's taking not so much energy when going every day to the company, to the office. And I'm getting energy when I'm going to the office, because I love the people I'm working with, and I love the things that I'm doing, because I'm solving problems other people have, and I'm trying to give them the time to do better things and automate things or something like that. You understand? And that's giving me energy. So my daily job isn't as energy taking for me, but and so I love it and can go home and have also energy for my children. That's the perfect balance, work-life balance.
The other stuff
But
is just a bonus, right?
And my side projects, yeah, sometimes they're taking some energy from me, I think, because I love to work with other people. And if you're doing some things alone, you can't get feedback from others so easily than in a team. So, yeah, my side projects are not so good and so big as they could have been. But doesn't matter. How you said, my daily job is paying the bills.
Yeah. And I mean, I mean, how exciting is it that we are basically in a workplace or we're working in a job where we can do side projects and just basically, I mean, I have a hard time explaining that to my partner, who's like completely not a computer person and doesn't have anything to do with them. And she's like, "So you're working again?" I'm like, "No, this is fun, but it looks the same." You know, like, that's the tricky bit. Like, I'm doing this for myself right now, and she's like, "No, I mean." That's why there is on weekends I don't touch computers at all, and basically, at like 7 o'clock I'm leaving the office, which is my flat here, and go to our place, and actually don't do any computer work at all, because if you don't stop us, we just stay into it the whole time.
But I'm in a great position that I'm married to a front-end developer, and he's as passionate in his job as I am. So if I'm working on Saturday in the morning and I think I have the greatest idea, I need to do that, he understands me. He doesn't say no because we have to do some other things. He says, yeah, of course, take your 3-4 hours and do that if you have to.
Well, the children haven't been fed for 3 hours. That doesn't matter. I'm using Flexbox instead of Grid here. Like,
it doesn't matter. We can deliver a pizza.
They should go and discover something. They will find something to eat if we give them enough time.
They're not so small now. So they're 8 and 10 and 17. So
fair enough. Yeah, so one of them can deal with the others. So you can actually have a junior developer in your office already. So that's pretty cool. How's your kids? Do they like computers as well, or is it just like because mom and dad love it, we hate it?
They love to game. So with a mobile phone or also on their computer or on the PS4, I think we have. But they're not so passionate like me and my husband on the computer. They're not so. I think it's talent, because when I got my first computer in my hands, I was 8 years old, and 6 years later, without any education, no one showed me anything, I could have learned my teacher things in informatics back in school. And my children, they have a computer. The middle one, the 10-year-old does have it now for I think 2 years, and she's not so talented, I think, but she's in other things talented. So we do not have junior developers.
Well, maybe it's just because for us it was something new and cool, and for them it's just something that exists. I mean, we don't get excited about faucets in our bathroom. We're just like, oh, look, when I open it, water comes out. Like, I want to find out how. Like, we don't do that. But for them, it's like offline is not a thing. They don't know what it is. Like, yeah. So that feels like maybe the excitement isn't there. It's interesting. There's a Code Combat, for example, is a website where you can learn coding by writing a game. So you have like a character that goes around the maze, and you say like go left, shoot, and learn if statements, learn loops that way. And I found that a very interesting way to get people into it. So it's interesting in the education space what we do, but maybe by now we don't even need to know that anymore. Now, that writing brittle code thing was an interesting bit as well, which is like, I thought it was like code that actually it was about like roll things out that can break, but it was more about like use the thing even if you don't know it yet to get into it. So it was an interesting thing. Did you take a look at that, Dan, as well, or did you have no time for it?
Yeah, no, I took a look. My understanding was the same, actually. I went into it thinking it was just that, saying, don't worry about writing code that breaks. I really like the attitude, actually. I think that it kind of taps in a strange way to like gatekeeping, of when do you consider yourself, like, when would you add that you know a certain programming language to your sort of CV? When would you say, I know this? And I think there's sometimes like I've always been sort of interested in, I don't know why, Python's just appealed to me. I think I saw the syntax once. I thought that's actually really readable. I quite like that. And knowing that it's sort of so good for data science, it's something that in the back of my head, I go, one day I want to pick that up. And I just wonder when there would come a day where I would then go, yeah, I think I know how to write Python. And I think in some ways it's like your mentality, right? If you're okay picking something up and being not a cowboy, but maybe feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome at telling people you can write it, well, at least you can write some of it. So that's a start and you're going to learn more. So I think there is something interesting in that article, yeah.
It's an interesting approach to just jump in and try it out. I found that when I worked for an agency, like we worked on like visitbritain.com, McDonald's, CODE100, government websites, and every project had a different tech stack. So if I had said like, oh, I have to learn the whole thing before I actually get in there, I would not have had my job or a career. And it was just like basically the 3 years in that agency, I learned every platform on this planet and forgot all about it 2 months later. I think that's where it breaks. Like if you do it just to build the thing, but you're not actually following it up, that's where it breaks up, falls apart. But you shouldn't be afraid just to try different environments, because in the end, it's about patterns, how things work. And I haven't seen much difference between different stacks that way. The patient programmer was another interesting one, which is basically David Bushell, lovely person. We might get him on the show here as well. And he's all about like, it's so frustrating to like the attribute thing we talked about earlier, to try things out and then it doesn't work. So basically I found that when I worked on the browser and I basically gave people something in the beta or in the nightly or in the, you have to turn on that feature to see it happening. And people then didn't used it, didn't work, discarded it. So the idea is like he actually advocates for staying behind the curve a bit and say like, okay, if you're in a half a year's time, you get excited about the thing that everybody's blogging about today, that's actually okay, because by then it's probably ready for consumption and probably ready for production. And I found that an interesting approach, a frustrating approach for somebody like me who wanted to implement these features and get people to try it. But it's a very pragmatic approach, because in your day-to-day life, you're not going to take the coolest and newest all the time as well. So is this something that I guess, Nikki, in your environment, that seems like something that you're just forced to do just by attribution of what your company is doing? Like you cannot use the newest beta test things because you don't have any time for that, but you take on things later on and then realize their feature.
Yeah, I can't even take the newest JavaScript things or the Node.js things, because we are working now on Node.js 6.9.2. Don't blame me. So the newest features are never ever. Maybe in a half a year when we push the whole project up, then I can consider to take some newer features in my code, but now it doesn't work. Never ever.
It feels
sorry for that.
It feels good to use things later on, but it also feels like you're falling behind. That the FOMO of not using the cool new things that the cool people talk about is, I think we should just not take care of. We shouldn't actually feel bad about this, because most of the time when I see these things, it's either the people that work on the products themselves, or it's people that are basically, their job is to give you the coolest and newest and not ready, rather than like that. So I don't think there's any shame in like waiting for a half a year before you use something.
I think it's smart. I actually think it's the smart thing to do.
In the production, yes, but for testing, not. If there's a new thing out there, I need to test it immediately to see how it works, how it feels, how I can implement it. for the production, I understand that's not a good idea.
Things people get wrong about Electron. I'm not going to get into much detail there, but this is basically by Felix, who works on the Electron project that I worked with in Microsoft before as well. Electron got a bad rep for being like being bloated and being a dangerous thing compared to native applications. But there is a lot of really good information in there as well that actually feels exciting to see from somebody who worked on the project to exactly know. So before you bash Electron again in public, just take a look at that and see what you really have to deal with here. 80% fail rate in NewsGuard's chatbot red team audit. Red team, blue team, if you don't know, it's a security thing, like it's people that try to break things. But basically DeepSeek has an 83% fail rate. I'm worried about this. Like, I mean, everybody's super excited about DeepSeek being like the open source version and the free version of the expensive things right now. So whenever I see something negative about it, I'm wondering if that's on purpose or if it really is that bad. It's interesting though. Like I don't trust generated stuff as much. Maybe I should. Maybe I shouldn't care too much. But it feels like there's a lot of things to be learned there. Same with like knowledge benchmark on history. So basically it asked AI chatbots about historical events, and it was really, really bad about this. I mean, seeing the latest political things, I think people have forgot about history as well. But it's interesting how broken that is. You looked into that a bit, Dan, right? The history bit.
Yeah, and it's actually something I've been interested in right from when I did my degree. My degree was a media production degree. It was totally out of this kind of realm. But on that course, I suppose, I was very interested in the way that media and technology preserve history and the way they tell history. You can look at films, of course, and see one telling of history. But I actually think there's a conversation here that most people in the sort of the everyday person, I suppose, are missing, that these LLMs will become the history books. They will become the things that tell us stories about the past. And now we know that they're actually an extension of different countries, different states, kind of fighting each other and competing with each other. It only stands to reason then that the LLMs are going to have an account of history that is favorable to the people that have created them. So I think that there's a really interesting thing that's happening here, that it's not just, DeepSeek fails some tests, but it's potentially we're getting into really murky territory around how history is preserved. And it brings up that whole history is written by the victors, but now it's just history is written by the people that control the LLMs that tell us the history, I think, anyway.
DeepSeek on Azure. I found interesting as well that we basically, how to get to DeepSeek is basically people were just like, okay, you have to get into your new system, sign up for it, download it, use it locally, which you could. But the Azure demos are quite interesting because when people said like, okay, it killed like the whole of Azure and OpenAI. And what does Microsoft do? It just puts it on Azure and gives a JavaScript wrapper around it so you can actually play with it. I found it a very clever way of dealing with the issue. Have you played with it in any other capacity, or have you just basically used it yourself?
Over to you, Nikki. I've actually not used it myself, DeepSeek, and certainly not in an Azure environment. How about you?
You should be all over Azure, right, Nikki? Or are you hosting things locally?
No, we are over Azure, but not DeepSeek and no AI connected to it. We use locally the cursor thing. It's not working so good in our project, how I said. But maybe that's because there is not so much code like that that has trained the cursor thing. It was a really special person who has written this project and has to deal with.
I guess Werner would be more excited about that. Yay, I can use JavaScript and do the stuff and don't have to do that server-side thing and learn Python. So that's pretty amazing. Mozilla Solo is not about takeover from Disney and going into Star Wars, but it's actually a page generator. And I found that an interesting concept. Give it a go. So basically what it does, you give it a prompt and you give it an explanation what the page should be, and then it pulls together like texts and images and things, and then you can edit them and put them together. There's probably 600 of them a day that actually try to use AI to make page generators. I like that it's by Mozilla, so there is it shows that basically your data is not going anywhere, and I hope that it's actually something that might prevent people from using a whole WordPress instance just to build a page. So I asked to make it. I asked it to do a yoga classes for capybaras to see how it breaks, but it actually made a website that actually looked quite okay and was interesting to take a peek at. So of course there's the upsell would be then to give you a domain to connect to it and these kind of things, but it is the code generated wasn't that bad either. So maybe something to just play with. I think it's an interesting idea. My worry is like if you do something like that, it's going to get flooded by people that just want to generate like tons of pages to cross-link and SEO black hat-y things. But we'll see how Mozilla actually deals with that kind of attack. The business location I found interesting as well. So it basically is a like generate your restaurant website idea. So it actually can show the map directly with it. Not a bad plan either. I see so many of them dying. I tried now for the upcoming Love as a sales thing, Valentine's. I tried to get us a table, and like all the restaurant websites in our neighborhood in Berlin are broken. So I had to call them later on because there were some restaurant optimizer SEO page generator from 20 years ago probably, and none of them have been maintained since then. So that feels like a weird thing, but it's interesting to see Mozilla go into that space rather than into the browser space and the AI space. Something fun to play with.
The most important advantage of a WordPress instance is that the user can maintain his text and his images on its own. Yeah. And I had a lot of clients that I gave a WordPress site for simple pages because I don't want to go on anywhere to only change one letter. So the most advantage of the WordPress thing is they can make the content and the boring things on their own.
That's the whole idea of the content management system, isn't it? You disconnect the content from the display so people can maintain it. And I think that what you see is what you get of HTML was never achieved. And it made more sense to, although it was frustrating when I worked in CMS, like I always ended up like, I said like, okay, here's a text editor. You can write your text like you do in Word, and you can put some images in like you do in Word. And that's basically it. And then sooner or later, people wanted to have a what you see is what you get editor because they wanted to mess with it. And then there was an inconsistency between pages, and it became really hard to maintain. And like, it was too, mind you, I mean, I'm still using the text editor in WordPress. I'm not using Gutenberg, the drag and drop editor. So maybe I'm using it wrong, but it gives me too much power, I think. Once you're laid off, you'll never be the same again. That's a big topic, and we're actually quite there. Your former jobs that you had, like basically, did you leave or did you get fired or did the company go bankrupt? Or
I understand. This job here in this company, I'm working here for 2 years, and before I was self-employed for 10 years. So I haven't lost any clients. We always got on to our end in a good mood. So, but sometimes there was no work for me, so I left the clients. So sometimes only for projects, and sometimes it was over 3 years or so. But I never got fired.
I mean, I'm not sure I mean, most of the time in my case, it was redundancies when the company went bankrupt or the company changed and the departments weren't existing any longer. But it is a weird feeling when you basically get terminated, so to say, and you wonder if it's you or what's going on. And I think my main advice for people is to never take it personal. And I think oftentimes we get too excited about our company and we actually give them more credit than they actually deserve. They're not our family. They're not our people. So basically, they pay us to do a job. So if your job is made redundant, it's possibly most of the time not you, but actually what your job does for the company. So if your company is like a startup that needed a front-end developer to build the first app, and the app is out there, and then they actually pivot into, I don't know, some Dogecoin thing, then you shouldn't feel bad that you get actually laid off because the company changes. It's their actually, they made the mistake to have you as a resource and have nothing for you to do, much like you just said. Like when your customers don't have anything to do as a freelancer, then of course you shouldn't get paid any longer, and it makes no sense. But it's not the quality of your work or you personally. It's just that the environment around you changed. Dave just posted in the comments that him being laid off was the best thing that ever happened to him. So yeah, I mean, if there is a golden parachute, like if there is a good payoff, or like the company basically pays you for the time that you've been there, it's also a good time just to unwind and basically not do anything until you're actually getting into the next role where you're off to. So don't feel bad about being laid off unless you've done something horrible. Then it's a different story. So, top 5 security mistakes developers make. What was the worst security mistake that you've ever done, Nikki, and what was the result?
Don't think I should talk about that.
Talking about getting laid off, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, for real, I don't remember. I made so much mistakes, and I hopefully learned from all of them, because when you're making a mistake, the best thing you can do from failing is to learn from these failures. So I can't remember a specific one. Sorry.
I found a really weird cultural thing about that. When every European developer that I know, or especially Germans, Dutch people, are always like, okay, if something goes wrong, let's analyze the hell out of it so we don't do it again. Like, if something is broken, we like to actually analyze it and we actually fix it. Whereas like in California, when I told people like your code's broken, then they always feel like attacked personally, because they're like, oh, yeah, but I put so much effort in, so much time in, and I'm like, it doesn't matter, because that basically is like the code is broken. It's not that you're a bad developer. It's just the code is broken. We have to find out why that happens. Like the whole idea of like postmortems, and the whole idea of like finishing the product and then seeing what went wrong is not a cultural thing. Whereas like in Europe, it really is. Like we seem to love to actually show our own mistakes to ourselves. But I found that in California, especially, it's been like anathema to them. It feels like, don't say that it's broken, because it shows that you're not showing respect for the time of your colleagues.
I think it depends on the personality of the people. I had some colleagues that were really personally offended when I said in the PR, no, that's not okay, please do it other way. It's only a feedback, I told him, and haven't spoken to me for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. Well, lots of mistakes there. GitHub Copilot vulnerabilities, the overview. So that one, don't know if you looked into that more in detail, Dan, but it basically shows you it was an internal security test and a third party. And I think it's important to make these things public. So it's really interesting to see what vulnerabilities were in there. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't use Copilot. It just means like, normally, as soon as these things come out, you know that somebody has fixed them already or is working on fixing them already. So it always fascinates me when people give open source a bad reputation because look at all these bugs they have. And I'm like, well, they just announced them. That's the difference. They didn't hide them.
You've got millions of people's eyes on those issues because it's open source. Like, there's no criticism. It's good. And it's good that they're doing this as well. This is really good. This is really good as well that it is being sort of drilled into and made public, because I think that just gets the community more, that security community more interested in the roots of those problems and then finding out if there's more. So I think it's great to see that transparency.
WordPress websites found delivering macOS and Windows malware. Yeah, it's the most attacked thing on this planet. Like, 60% of the internet is WordPress or something like that. So it's not surprising that these things are in there. But have a scanner, really. Like I can only say, like, scan the hell out of your WordPress instance every 2 days. I have a logger that basically tells me this is weird. Did you write this? Was that coming in? Like, because it's if you have a successful WordPress site, it's going to be part of a bot army sooner or later if you don't do that. So it's really important. A few tools: H2 tunnel TCP over HTTP2. This is basically an alternative to ngrok, which allows you to basically use your local website as a website for the people out there. Great for showing things quickly to people, not that much of a good idea if you actually want to do it as a hosting your own website from your machine. A lot of people don't know that, and it's actually in Visual Studio Code has something similar. But basically, you can forward your port, and then it generates an Azure website for you that actually you can then say make public, and people can use it. And then you can, if you stop forwarding the port, the Azure URL redirect also goes away. So that's just a way to see your local product and actually put it out there. We put that as a demo in the newsletter on Friday. How about that? Yeah. But it's already built in. But ngrok is not free, I think, and H2 Tunnel is free. So that's an interesting thing to do with that. I love this. Did you take a look at that, Dan? Taboo?
Let me open that one again. Remind myself. Oh yeah, great, love it. I know we talked recently about building, like, there's loads of these out there, those kind of site blockers, and I'd started working on one for myself because I'm terrible at getting distracted by random news sites, but that is so much more creative than I would have done. So I've given up on that project because that's great. I love that.
So that's basically when you go to a website that you spend too much time on, this will, like, after like a random amount of time, give you that scary face and the sound to actually stop you from just going down the rabbit hole and answering the 10,000th thread answer that you want to have in there. So that's an interesting bit to try out. This is really, really cool. This is basically Clop, it's called, and it optimizes images as soon as you copy them. So it's actually you put it in your copy and paste, and it actually, if it's an image, it makes it smaller. If it's a video, it makes it smaller as well. If it's a PDF, it tries to make it smaller. So what I normally do is I save things and then I use Image Optim to optimize it. And that one is actually a copy and paste handler that does these things automatically for you. So screen recordings are smaller screenshots and these kind of things. Dan, for example, is really, really good in sending me 4K resolution videos of like 20 gigabyte. That should be like 50 meg. And I'm always using FFmpeg on the command line to do it. But this is actually a tool that builds that automatically. That's the kind of stuff that I want to have in the operating system itself. As much as I'm a Mac user, I love that on Windows you got the history of the pasteboard that I use an extra tool for on Mac. So that will be the next step, I think, to a degree, because people don't realize the size of things any longer. They just create lots of files and just don't know what the size of it is. So optimizing it automatically while you're copying it, not a bad idea at all.
They show on that demo, they actually show them dragging things into the email, which is kind of the main thing I think you'd probably use it for, right? If you're kind of generating those images or videos, they're nearly always too big for email, so you don't even really consider it an option. You always have to upload it and then put the link in and things like this. So yeah, that's really nice. I like that. Yeah, try that. Is that Mac available as well? Is that available for Mac? Or
that is a Mac thing.
It looked like it was. Oh, it is Mac. Yeah, cool.
And then free profiles for designs. I found that very interesting. That's basically an image generator that gives authentic images rather than those perfect AI images that you always get like these perfect characters, and these are all a bit quirky and these are all a bit weird. Like they AI generated, but they look like real people. So, okay, that doesn't look like a real person, but most of them are actually, I love that they actually have problems. They have like skin conditions and all kind of things to make them a bit broken. It feels like this old AI page that thispersondoesn'texist.com, which was the first one that actually showed generated images, and they had like wonky eyes and like 8 fingers and stuff like that. And but this one is an interesting one that if you want people not to scare them with like the perfect images, and they're all available for download and like I think it's Creative Commons license, and you can actually filter them and say like what the ethnicity of it is going to be, and like I think that's a kind of cute idea. Coffee commit. Talk us through it, Dan. What is that?
So the way they sell it, there's a line actually that says something like, show your boss basically your productivity in relation to your coffee breaks. So it kind of correlates your coffee breaks and then your commits, the number of commits and the quality of them and things like this. So yeah, I think that's great. I mean, we all know it's a little kind of ongoing joke and meme about, coffee, more code, that kind of thing. But I think that's really nice. And I actually really like the design of it. I wouldn't usually use brown on a UI, but they made it look nice. Yeah, it's really cool. Again, just great fun.
Yeah, I mean,
is there also something with chocolate milk?
Oh, Milka as well.
Similar.
I guess you can. It's on GitHub. I guess you can actually do a fork and actually show that. Coffee milk, that gets me more tired than anything else. Not like chocolate milk that gets me more tired than anything else. Well.
Some people say that they are producing from caffeine the code. I'm producing it from sugar. Give me sugar and I'm productive.
That's more spikes, isn't it? Like a sugar rush is like you get really spiky, then you get tired again, and like.
So you need to nutrition me. So every hour, 1.5. So give me some chocolate. Perfect. My team colleagues know it.
I was in Vienna yesterday for our office, and I had Almdudler with like mate, and that's basically like this herb lemonade normally, but this one had like tea in it and like tons of caffeine, and that was just basically really kicking me. That was fun. It's I heard colors and stuff, so that was really good. The last jokey thing is C16.css. It's basically a CSS library based on Counter-Strike UI. So if you're really into old school gaming, what I find best about this is like how absolutely inaccessible it is. Like the font sizes are far too small. The contrast is horrible. But then you remember that in those days, 1024 was the highest resolution you had. And normally it's 800, 600 resolution. So the tiny bits that we have right now would have been a text like that. So it's kind of cute that the people are going for that old look and feel of like things that don't exist any longer. And it's fun to show just how fast you can roll out a design framework these days as well. I just want to say, Nikki, you're looking forward to CODE100 then?
I'm there, and maybe also as a moderator if you take me again.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So, what was it that made you choose it the first time? Like, how did you apply the first time? Because it feels like it's tricky to get people to submit to it, to submit things and send things in.
The first time I was in Amsterdam at a conference, and there was the CODE100 challenge, and I was too late, and I was only in the audience there, but also got, I think, a minute or so on the stage and helped the other persons. And it was such an amazing feeling, and I on that moment I said I want to be part of it. And yeah, wasn't so difficult. I think the puzzles you gave us are really, really easy, I think, also for my husband. And so please, people, try to do it.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. This was great. I hope you had a good time, and I will definitely see you at the Congress. And yeah, for all of you watching, or all of you who have been watching this afternoon at 4 o'clock, reminder, we have that talk coming up as well. So if I share this one again, you will see that where it is, and there's the QR code and everything. So this afternoon, 4 o'clock, Andy Terrell is going to talk about Cuda in Python. And in between, I'm going to make another coffee or maybe a chocolate milk this time. We don't know yet. Thanks again, Nikki. Thanks again, Dan. Any last words from you for the people out there? Apparently not.
I can say see you at 4 o'clock, Chris. And Nikki, I'm sure you're going to be there as well. So I'll see you again at 4.
I hope so, maybe from the car when I'm driving home.
Perfect.
Probably look at the road instead. That might be a good thing to do. Like, yeah.
That's true.
I think the most part here is hearing and not seeing, isn't it?
True.
Well, if you drive by ear, that's not necessarily a good thing. Oh, you mean listening to it while you're driving? Okay, that makes more sense. All right, cool. Well, thanks very much.